Okay, this video is for H5, the section H5. Let me just check. We're in Learner Task 3 here. And it deals with stairwell openings and how to calculate them. So I'd like to walk you through that process here. And once you've gone through the walkthrough, you can try the practiced question or questions that have been posted. Okay, so a stairwell opening, we talked about this in previous videos. The length of the opening has to be calculated before building the opening in the floor or the framing above the stairwell. So the length of that rough opening depended on the headroom and the thickness of the floor system, the rise and the run, all things that I've mentioned in previous videos. Let's see if I can scroll up to the picture. There we go. Okay, so the length of the opening is dependent on the headroom we require, the thickness of this flooring system, and then the rise and run of the stairs. Let's talk a little bit about the finished opening. That would be that distance we just talked about, from the edge of the nosing at the landing to the face of the finished wall at the header, the other end of the opening. So we're making the distinction here between finished and rough opening. When we do this calculation, we are calculating for the finished opening. So we're gonna have to allow 3 inches or 75 millimeters to give us a bit of wiggle room as far as what kind of finishes we're going to be putting on if we're trying to determine how to frame that opening. So here we go. Calculate the length of the rough opening of the stairwell. Start with the finished opening. Here's your ratio and proportion. We've dealt with that quite a bit already in the course. Okay, and then it's basically becomes a formula based on isolating for your finished opening. And since it's the unknown, we're going to move what's on the bottom here, the floor thickness plus the headroom. We're going to multiply it out on this side, which cancels out, and we're going to bring this up over. So the rise over the run gets multiplied. Or sorry, the run over the rise gets multiplied by that. And there again is our visual. So the floor thickness says here, the sum of the ceiling finish, most typically will be a 1/2 inch drywall. The joist depth could be a 2x10, 2x12, could be an I joist. It depends on what's specified in your specific problem. The subfloor thickness, so we're talking about the sheathing on top of that framing. Typically 5/8 tongue and groove, depending on what you're using again though, could be 3/4, could be 1 inch. Now we get into an example. So now we're going to deal with metric. So our number of risers will be 15, so we've already determined how many risers we have. We've determined our number of treads to be 1 less than the number of risers, 14. We've also determined that a unit rise is going to be 177 millimeters. And using a proportioning rule, 177 plus 273 looks like it adds up to 450. I'm just going to do a quick check on my calculator. I don't know. I think they're just pulling this example from above. Let's scroll above. Okay, 264, 273. So no, they're not. So I'm going to add 177 for the unit rise plus 273. It gives me 450. So these two numbers here add up to 450 millimeters. So that's a proportioning rule that we've used here. We have a headroom. This would be a code requirement. This looks like it's a private dwelling, 1950 millimeters. And we have an entire floor thickness of 227 millimeters. And now we're just going to take our formula, which we have up here. We're going to plug everything we know into that formula. The only unknown is the finished stairwell opening. So we're going to plug everything else in. And we're going to move this up to the side. We're going to take 273, divide it by 177. And then I'm going to multiply that by So we found our finish opening to be 3,358 millimeters. I suggest you do these calculations as we walk through it, just to do a practice run through of the math. And knowing that we're looking for the rough opening, we're going to take that finished opening, we're going to add our 75 millimeter, which again, go back up here. This is an allowance 3 inches or 75 millimeters. Okay, give us our rough framing. Basically, it's wiggle room. And then they give you the exclamation point, which are always good to focus on. Common mistake is to forget that. So if the question is asking you to find the rough opening, you need to find the finish opening, and then you need to add that. And then that's what you use to position the headers in the floor frame above. So this is a reference back to H3, which talked about how to frame floors, frame openings of floors. We talked about when you need to double up your header, double up your trimmer. So if this is a bit foreign to you, you're going to have to go back and read that again and become more comfortable with that. At this point, you should know these terms and what we're talking about. So the following formula is a shortened version of the similar triangle equation above with the 75 mil added. So all this is what was on the bottom over here has been brought over to the top, kept inside brackets, and then it's being multiplied. Okay, so this is the whole bed mass rules apply here. You have to do everything according to the bed mass being brackets, exponents, division, multiplication, and so on and so forth. So they give us an imperial example here. We have a total rise of 107.25, desired rise 7 inches. Okay, so the first move we need to make is find our actual rise. To do that, we take our total rise, divide it by the 7 inches, our desired rise. That gives us 15.32 rises. In this case, we're going to round down to 15 rises because you can't have a portion of a rise. And then we're going to take that 15 and put it back into our total rise because the total rise doesn't change. That's what it is. And we get 7.15 inches. And you take the 0.15, multiply by 16, gives you 2/16, which becomes 1/8. And then they give you the 3 proportion rules that have been talked about previously. This is the check, and this is what I want you to keep in mind when you're doing these. Even when you're doing the simply finding the rise and run, is a code compliancy. So after you've figured out that your rise is going to be 7 1/8, you need to make sure that that's an acceptable rise within the range of the code, which is, what is it, 5 inches is the minimum rise, 8 inches is the maximum rise. You need to be within those. If you happen to do the math and you get something outside of that range, you need to increase your number of risers or decrease depending on where you are to get within that code compliant range. So that's what we're talking about here. These are the 3 different ways to do it. Notice how, depending on which proportioning rule, the number changes slightly. Okay, so my suggestion is to try and stick with the 17-inch rule. It gets a little convoluted, like I said in the previous video. And then they add a floor thickness. They give you 11.25 inches, and they give you a desired headroom of 6'6", which looks like it's for a public dwelling. Actually, maybe not 6'8" public, so but it's a bit more than you need for a private, so somewhere in between. So we're going to plug those numbers in. So they're not doing the conversion for you. They are doing it, but they're not showing you. So you have to recognize that 11.25 inches is 11.25 inches, and you have to recognize that 6'6" has been turned into what would that be? 78 inches. So they've added those 2 together, and that's the number they got. Okay, so there's a bit of conversion that they're not showing you there that you have. They're assuming you know at this point in the course. And after all those numbers have been converted, we have a finished stairwell opening of 122.953. The rough stairwell opening, again, is with the number we just found for the finish, and we're going to add the 3-inch allowance for finishes. So we're going to make it a little bit wider for the rough framing. There's your answer. We talked briefly about the unit of bridge. Unit of bridge is useful when laying out long stair stringers and calculating the stringer length, and will be discussed in greater detail in learning tasks 4 and 5. But basically, the unit of bridge, I think I mentioned this in a previous video as well, is the hypotenuse of the rise and the run multiplied by, well, that's the unit of bridge, and if you want to find the total unit of bridge to find out how long of a string you need to buy, you just need to multiply those by the number of treads. Okay, so I hope this video helps get you through the math for calculating stairwell openings. There'll be a sheet posted for you to practice. Okay, thank you.